and a report.
I have one card, Herbert Milano.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mincy. My name is Herbert Milano. Gentlemen, I got to correct myself now with Ms. Friedman here. Of all the measures of quality of life that stands out as indicators of our well-being, our perception of a decent government is one that we should always look out for. How well does it take care of the needs of its residents or citizens? Unfortunately, we don't have with us Councilman Najarian, because I wanted to talk about traffic congestion as being one of those measures that is a very good indicator of our quality of life. The greater the traffic congestion, the worse we feel our quality of life is, especially as we commute morning and afternoon. So, when you look at the improvements that have occurred in the last couple of 100 years, and the ones that were truly significant, we are taught in school about the Erie Canal. Most people don't know that that particular effort reduced the costs to the economy by about 66% for those individuals who are transporting goods in the New York area. So as the transportation improves, the economy improves, and our quality of life improves. But what we have right now is the opposite. Traffic gets worse and worse. So if you're in the business of transporting goods, it gets more and more expensive and less reliable. And for those individuals who have to commute, it really is a significant deterioration. Now that I'm commuting again, as I did several years ago, towards the Los Angeles area, I find myself that it's shocking to see the level of traffic congestion that we have right here on the 2 freeway. And so when I look at your policies, for example, the policy of increasing the cost to the general public, or with regard to the B line, figure that just seems to go contrary to any type of objectives that we may have in getting people, away from their cars and into public transportation. There's these decisions have a significant impact on our quality of life, especially those individuals who have the least means, who have the most fragile jobs, if they're lucky enough to have a job. And so sometimes when we look at policies and they are isolated away from the rest of the other targeted goals, then you can do a lot of things in isolation without really looking at the impact that it may have, down the road. And let me give you another example of the decisions that you make that are sometimes isolated from targeted objectives. Tonight, you're going to be discussing the Federal Workforce Investment Act. With about $180,000, at least for Glendale, you're going to be providing jobs for about 66 kids. And that money is not the general fund money. It's not money that comes from the local taxpayers. It's basically coming from the state of California, who in turn gets it from the federal government, I believe. But when you look at a policy for a city to say, what is the impact of giving jobs to youth? They get supposedly busy now, and they're not going to be, spending a lot of idle time getting into mischief. Fewer problems to the police department. That money generally gets reinvested locally because most of these kids don't have necessarily transportation. So when you look at what $180,000 in funds for jobs for youth will have, it's a fairly significant quality of life issue. We have lots of measures out there with regard to how to improve the life of these kids, but what we don't get is the gap between those kids who get some kind of assistance and the ones who don't. But we don't know how many are there that could be looking for a job and are not able to. And it's my opinion that as we look overall at all of the services that are being provided to youth, this is just one of those measures. I bring with me, and sometimes I put it here for display if I happen to have the time, the strategic plans of other cities. And I have the one from Olathe, Kansas, that I find that gives those measures. When I look for, and I ask for measures on the quality of life to be brought before you and see delays after delay after delay, some of those measures really are there in the strategic plan of many cities that they do every single year. I believe that the city needs to create another report on the status of youth, as a good example, to sort of refresh our minds on the difficulties that we have in this city and many families at risk have. unfortunately, it's the housing authority, as opposed to any other department within the city, that gets normally the lead in following through on quality of life issues. In my opinion, maybe planning should be, involved. But I think that we need a whole new report with regard to issues on the status of youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. I have no other cards, so oral communications is closed. Next, please, I believe is business. Do we have any? Don't believe we have any. Any member comments?
Move we adjourn.
Wait. Laura?
Oh, sorry.
Do we have anyone here who can speak to the Beeline issue about the cost increase? Any staff members? It's a little off topic for housing, so there's no one here to speak to that. But I've gotten some emails, also asking about the cost increase. And without having, staff here to really give more of the numbers, it's my understanding that one of the reasons that the cost was increased is because the Beeline, being so inexpensive at a quarter, was preventing us from getting state funds. That we had to raise that to be able to get state monies. So it is going up, but it's still a real nominal cost when compared to any other public transportation in the region. And for that, we should get a real trade-off in terms of a much better service. So I understand the concern, but I think that the nominal increase will hopefully pay off, much more than that increase is costing the residents.
Okay. I will say that the one area that I disagree, I can understand the cost increase, but not being able to use an MTA. Are we allowed to talk about this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I see
that's
the-
one of the risks with brief comments
Yeah.
from staff, that it may engender debate, and that begins
Okay.
to become a slippery slope relative to the Brown Act. Certainly, as Mr. Starbird is fond of saying, we can provide you with a report, whether it's just a memorandum report or ultimately put it on the agenda. But you need to be somewhat cautious about engaging in discussion and debate and differing points of view, because
That's why
the
we
matter's
have
not
a
on the
city
agenda.
attorney here. Oh, do you want to talk about the reasons? Okay, if there are no other comments, there is a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second?
We are adjourned.
Bye, Laura.